Hey, Footy and Frothies. We're back. 2024. Today's the long haul. I think there's been since we've got to the pub here to set up and everything. We're in the Studio A here at the Grey Gums Hotel in Western Sydney. It's our shithole. And we know we've been saving our energy because I think we know we're in for a long haul getting through these into 17 teams and getting stuck into each and every one in some depth to kick off the year. So who are we? Former vice captain of the Penrith High touch team, Adrian D'Agostino, is hosting. We've got the former back rower from the Manila Tigers, Barney, David Harvey. How are you, my friend?
Very well, thank you, mate. It's spent a bit of time at the Waratahs and Emu Plains down in Penrith as well when we came back down here. But yes, the glory years of the Manila Tigers was almost 4 years undefeated. Lost one game and it was a grand final in 4 years. So.
Nice.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
And then beers got involved and yeah.
Yeah, well, same happened to me. Funny story. We'll say that for another time. And now we can't get rid of him. The Beer Garden Sports MMA maestro and our scorekeeper, GT, Greg Thompson, has joined us again. What's happening, my friend?
Yeah, not a lot. Enjoying the day off. Gonna talk some shit for a few hours and then back into work tomorrow and we'll do the same thing again.
Yeah. We will indeed. Let's try not to dwell too much on that. For those that are new to the show, thanks everyone that's jumped on, especially the YouTube channel the last couple of weeks. Been fantastic feedback and support, so continue to check that out. In terms of this show, if you're listening on Spotify, iTunes and everywhere else, it'll all be one big dump, so this will be a 3 or 4 or 5 hour podcast up on those avenues. YouTube I'll crack it down into some more digestible team by team chunks, so you'll be able to see that playlist up there as well. Give us your thoughts and how you agree or don't agree, or maybe suggest other things we might have missed as we head to the season. But we'll try and cover each team comprehensively and a bit of thoughts on their draws, trades, where they might end up, and maybe even a bit of super coach and some, what are they called? Pre-post markets, for lack of a better term, long-term premiership markets and such later on. Anyway, just a couple of quick points. There was an article out about how pushing the rules interpretations, how some might change this year. They're going to get rid of sleepers in the ruck area, so the blokes that stand in. I'm not going to name teams, but people know who they are.
Protection for the kickers and
such. Yeah. So they're cracking down on that. No more driving, more ruck and maul style tackles, pushing in a tackle.
Okay.
Less strict on deliberate knock-ons, which I'm not quite sure what that means.
See a penalty?
Probably not
for
penalty.
Haven't seen that enforced in a decade.
I can't remember the last time I saw one, so that was a bit baffling. And protection of players, third man in, I guess, cannonball-style tackles, protection of players standing in tackles, not getting hit.
I'd like to see that cracked down on more than anything else, to be honest. And the first two I agree with wholeheartedly. It's been something they've been trying to clean up for a while, and if they're going to push that way, then yeah, I'm all for it. I just hope we don't see the penalties increase by 30-40%.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously that's in addition to the changes around short kickoffs and dropouts and blah blah blah. I might get your mic up a tiny tad just so we all sound even. That's better. And there's greater emphasis on 10 metres and rucks and whatever else. So there'll be some sort of stupid crackdown round at some point on that. Anything else anything that's caught your eye, or anything you have an opinion on, having now got your head around each and every team?
I'd like to see a bit more consistency in regards to the leg drop. Last year it was very pick and choose. There was stuff that was quite obviously leg drops that were just left alone, and there were ones that were purely incidental that really had nothing to do with anything that were sent to the bin.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I guess consistency across everything.
Yeah,
probably all we ask for. Interpretations of video referees, leg drops, hip drops, whatever else. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's a few, obviously, individual things. Big news with the centre from South now. It looks like he's going to miss.
Campbell
Graham's going to miss probably at minimum half the season, which will have a big impact on them.
Well, it changes. I don't say changes everything, but changes a lot. We were going to kick off with South, actually.
Yeah, and we'll obviously get to them as an individual thing. As an overall, the draw, I've spent a fair bit of time looking through the draw going into this year. We'll go through each team as well, but just as an overall, I thought I thought in order, the hardest draw of all was probably South Sydney's draw this year, followed by Parramatta, Dolphins and Brisbane, who all do have a fair chunk of games against the top four. And I did mine. I worked it out with the bottom three because I thought they were probably the ones that would change less than anyone else. And everybody else in the middle I considered a 50-50 game for pretty much everyone else. And the Warriors for mine seem to have the easiest draw out of anyone this year.
Right, okay.
Followed very closely by the Sharks. And then you throw the Tigers and Raiders into that mix. So not a lot to do with 5-day turnarounds. Panthers and Tigers have got 3, but everyone else has only sort of got 1 or 2. I think that comes down to the bye and the Origin schedule. They're able to spread it out a bit further. But there's a lot of 8, 9, 10-day turnarounds this year too, which is unusual. But So.
I think as well there was, I think from memory, Dolphins are the only team that have the rough end of the Origin draw. So they don't have they basically don't play anyone under strength. They play that sort of thing. But we'll get there. I've got them notes somewhere. So their draw, they're going to be an interesting case to get to, the Dolphins actually, when we get there. But a weird year to do form on, to be honest, because not a lot's changed.
There wasn't a lot of massive changes. There was a few big signings for a handful of teams, but a lot of teams seem to just sort of go through this year with shifting around a couple of fringe players here and there and grabbing whatever they could find, I guess, on the market. So.
And clubs are now so, unless someone's really unhappy, clubs are just bunk down and try and sign everyone up long term as best they can. And apparently the big guns just want to go to rugby anyway, so we keep getting told. But we saw that with apparently Joey Manu. Apparently Angus Crichton, despite the fact the Herald reported completely contradictory. Apparently News Limited, 1P Rothfield is suggesting he'll be going to rugby as well, but that's all a year away. So, but yeah, like I said, not a lot else has changed, I don't think. We'll touch on super coaches, we'll get into teams, we'll touch on that sort of thing. Should we get stuck into it? Let's kick off. Oh, that's bad that reflux started 6 minutes in. A long way to go now. Gosh darn. Sponsored by Quickies. If Quickies actually would like to sponsor us, get in touch at sportsbeergarden@gmail.com. South Sydney Rabbitohs is how we are going to kick this off. They led the comp all the way through May and then just fell off a cliff, including a loss to the Bulldogs back end of the year. Just quickly, well, actually, how does their draw look before I do the player movements?
So they've got 5 games against the top 4, which is pretty reasonable, about average for most teams. But they've got 6 pretty tough games in that first 12 weeks to start the competition. So it's really a tough start for them, and that's about all I had for their draw. It was averaging to probably It is one of the tougher draws in the competition. And they've got only 3 games against the bottom 3 from last year as well. So really tough start to the season. So if they're not up and flying around May this year, hopefully they can do the opposite to what they did last year. But I can see it being a very tough start to the year for South.
Yeah, as you said, they copped the Roosters, Brisbane, Penrith, Storm all twice, which I don't think anyone else does cop. So what I've done is put together, I guess, somewhere between a best 17 and a likely first round 17, depending on injuries. Obviously, when I did this, Cam Graham was still available, but looking at it this way, I had Mitchell, Johnson, Wighton, who's going to plug in that left edge. Did have Graham, which I assume will now be Tass.
You would think so.
Wing would be Munro or Milne. Walker, Ilias, Totola, Cook, T. Burgess, who's off back to the UK at the end of the year, Colin Matungi, Arrow, Murray. The bench, and some of these benches are all going to be subject to form, fitness and trials. But Moali, Kepi, who's come over from the Seagulls, Tallis Duncan and Havili. And I should have opened with the gains and losses, which, yes, as Kepi and Wighton both in that team. They have lost Jed Cartwright, Liam Knight, who's gone to the Bulldogs, Hame Sele and Blake Taff. Look, with them, it's, as we said, it's an odd team to start this whole prediction show, preview show with, in that they're the same team. They have been for, 4 years now, essentially. We know what we get. I know left-hand dominant side. When they're very good at it. We saw last year that their edges, though, were diabolical at times. I know Campbell Graham was in it for a big deal of that, but some of those games at the back end, they fell apart as soon as the ball left got 2 or 3 pairs wide. So that's going to be their concern coming into this year. How are you? I've got a few questions I'll throw out, but how are you seeing them, Barn, at this stage?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that has to do with big chunks with Latrell missing. I think he does a lot to help their outside backs in the way that they set up in their defence. So he'll be key, obviously, keeping him on the field for a large chunk of the season. I've still got question marks around Ilias. I know he started quite well at the beginning of last year for 4 or 5 games, but the last 20 or so were middling to indifferent at best. In some cases, I barely recognised that he was on the field. So it's a bit of a problem when your 7 has got that many question marks around them. A lot of talk that they're going to get back into the top 4 this year, but with a strong attack, like running the edge running back rowers are really good. They've got some very good fleet-footed outside backs, but as you mentioned, I think there's a few too many questions in defence for mine, and I think they'll be towards the bottom of the 8 rather than pushing for that top 4 position at the end of the year.
How have you seen South this year, mate?
South are a strange one for me because they've got a really high ceiling, but their worst is absolutely diabolical. I've got this very similar sort of fears about Lachlan Ilias as you, Barn. But Sean Kepi's an interesting one for me. They've got quite a few up-and-coming sort of interchange forwards and second rowers that they can throw in, but he was sort of a fringe first grader at Manly, really not having that impact off the bench that you'd expect. And with people like Tallis Duncan waiting in the wings, I really can't see him getting too much game time this year.
Yeah, it's obviously they need to find someone to replace Tom Burgess by the end of the year. And I know they missed Totola for a lot. He was injured for a big chunk, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. And Moali this time last year was going to be
a sprint forward
the next breakout star.
They did have a few issues in that middle when Murray and Cook did start to get tired. Kepi probably a better defender than some of these middles that they do have. Sometimes he does switch off. His fitness has been a bit up and down. I think you'll see him and Havili probably fighting out for a spot on the bench. Obviously, the advantage for Havili is he can play a bit of 9 as well. Yep. And then, the question marks do come around Moale and probably Tallis Duncan, who sort of, one of those 3 is probably going to miss a spot. And I don't think it's going to be Duncan. So.
No. Look, I think Kepi shores up the middle a little. I think I can see him at least at start. He's starting. I think there's already been basically suggesting he'll be in the 17.
He's a pretty strong ball runner as well, which is something they did lack at times last year.
And that gives they'll be the third middle. I think Avili will spend some time there. They don't have another utility option.
Doesn't look like
so
it.
It's only, that's why I suggest Avili will be in that 17 most weeks because he can cover all of that forward pack essentially. And does give him size, which they
Cook can play centre apparently if he needs to.
Oh, I've heard that.
Yeah.
Oh, he's Origin.
I thought he only plays it when he's wearing blue.
Wasn't that good?
We'll move on from that. But it's interesting because there's going to be questions. The first 6 rounds, if they're not winning and it's a tough start to the year, the jungle drums are going to start beating.
And they're playing some big packs in those first few weeks.
Yeah, Manly, who...
Any injuries or suspensions?
Manly, Brisbane Roosters, some big packs to start. Well, Manly aren't really.
Brisbane, Penrith Roosters.
Penrith Roosters. Yeah. Even Sharks. Oh, Warriors and then Sharks. It's a real tough... If they're 0-6, they'll be... people will be screaming.
Absolutely, they will.
I'm bullish that Jack Wighton is a big in because... the key to South is keeping Cody and Latrell happy, it seems. And he's the best mate, it's all well documented, and they're already raving about how much of a difference he's made. He's sort of the one that'll tell them they're being dickheads when they're being dickheads and keep the morale up. And I think that's going to be a big key. I think him just being able to relax and play centre is going to be a big key. And I think he's... And slotting that left-hand edge, as we discussed in the Supercoach show, I'm particularly interested in him in Supercoach this year. And... I think he's going to just get back to being a tackle buster. He'll shore up at that left side defence, which they need. And I just think he's a great key to it. And if Ilias starts less than perfect, maybe we might see him at 6 by the end of the year.
You might see him back at 6,
So any thoughts on that?
I think you covered that pretty well, to be honest. I do think it should relax him a whole heap, not having to make the decisions on the inside there with the picking out ball players, because it's ball runners, because it's obviously not the strongest attribute that he has, being a ball player, Jack Wighton. They've still got some ridiculously good football players in this team.
Oh, absolutely.
With the likes of Murray and Cook, you throw in Walker, Latrell at the back. There will be games where a couple of those guys will win the game off their own bat, sort of thing. And it would be more than 50-50 chance of them breaking open a game every time that they step out in the field. So
their best footy last year, it didn't happen in the back end, was the up-tempo Murray Cook through the middle, finding an accomplice and then having Latrell or
and if you can get the likes of Totola maybe joining in there, or Kepi, you've got Kulamatangi on an edge. There's plenty of strike in this footy team. And my biggest issue is, as I said, the sevens. Injury and suspension plays a big part. If they lose a couple of their middles early, they look like they will be searching for some depth. And outside backs, I'm not sure there's a huge amount of strike in the blokes that they have to replace anyone if they lose outside backs as well.
Tass looked a world beater for a couple of games and looked like he's going to grow into something. I think had the sort of spectre over him of, he didn't have a job this year with Wighton coming in, but now he does. So
as I've gone through the teams, I've given them basically a bit of a spread of where I think they'll finish, and we'll nail it down at the end of the show. So I've got them finishing anywhere from 7th to 9th, basically, the South Sydney team. I think they'll finish in one of those three spots.
Well, it's because you look at South, you look at Para, and you think in your head you think, they're, how are we looking at this at top 4? They finished 9th and 10th. And teams don't, I know they're all, 12 wins, but as Gump said in the past, teams don't suddenly just
jump 5 wins
out of nowhere. So that is an interesting... Yeah, so I'm clumping them closer to the bottom of the 8, if at all, again, similar to you. Yes, they can get hot, but I just don't think there's over 27 rounds, there's enough depth to their forward pack. And I know these young forwards can come out of nowhere. Or Talis Duncan might be an Origin player by the time we get to Origin. Who knows? But right now, I think an injury to Tom Burgess would be a massive concern. An injury to either of their props really slows them down.
Murray or Cook takes a lot of organisation.
Bossed out of
lose Murray's ball playing.
And obviously, we shouldn't do a whole preview show based on who might not get injured all year.
Yeah, no, 100%.
But I have some concerns on that. Any final thoughts on South?
Well, Talis Duncan does look like a natural football player.
Yeah.
And he's one for the super coaches. At the moment, a whole heap of people have him in their team. He's at the price where you could probably hold him if he's not playing big minutes at the start of the year and just leave him on your bench, and hopefully he gets those minutes later. But I'm not sure he's going to be getting those minutes that warrant a spot in your Supercoach team at the very beginning of the season.
No.
I think maybe, he's someone that after this sort of tough draw goes through for the first six weeks or so, you might be looking at him round 7 or 8 or something like that. But if he does nail down a starting spot on an edge, or he's getting 40 minutes off the bench, then he's someone to throw into your Supercoach team.
And look, it is a preview, so just quickly thoughts on where Cook and Murray are at on the back of last year.
I expected Cook to drop off a little bit last year, and I thought he probably actually had one of his better years for his last couple, to be honest. Age naturally will grab both of these guys, and they're probably not going to get better than what they are at the moment, but I can't see them dropping off that much at all for the next especially Murray. He's got 2 or 3 years left him, in my opinion, before he starts to become an issue. And Cook's, I think he's still got another season or so in him.
Murray's role changed quite a bit last year too. He was a lot more distributing rather than digging into the line.
He went away from being, Mr. Fastest ball player in the comp to being, more of a... Which has followed the trend of the rest of the comp. Everyone wants a ball playing 13 now.
Well, they are a little bit limited with their ball playing options in the middle. Obviously, that comes back to Ilias and Walker. When Walker's on, he's brilliant, but he's still very dominant on one part of the field rather than being able to play everywhere else. Their bench rotation is a little bit of an issue for mine as well. So, as I said, got them at the bottom of the 8.
Well, especially because, as we touched on, I don't want to rehash, but Havili's literally the only utility option to have, unless you're going to play Mamazelos or find the young fella Hawkins or someone that's going to play more minutes. And they've lost Taff, who was the other option. That is interesting to me because we're in a comp now where 14s are so or really good 14s are as invaluable as most other spots in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on South?
My only other issue is how big do the pumpkins get? With people like Walker and Latrell, when things start to go wrong, they go really wrong.
Yeah.
So if they can keep their head screwed on, they can do well and push towards that top 4. But it's a matter of basically how well they've been spoken to in the off-season to actually get them screwed on, ready for the highs and lows of the season coming up.
Yeah. And that's where I think, well, that's where I was giving Wighton a bit of kudos, but it's
yet to be seen.
But he's also got as big a pumpkin as anyone else as well at times. And you know what it's like as much as anyone. Here we are at the pub. When your mates are in a blue, it's much hard to not join said blue and become pumpkin-like than otherwise.
Will they turn on him if he starts kicking a couple dead from 10 metres out?
I don't think so.
I don't think he'll get a kicking licence, to be honest,
No.
unless Ilias is spraying him all over the place. I can't see Wighton doing a lot of kicking. I think it'll be first choice will be Ilias, and then Latrell will be second choice.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Bottom of the 8, possibly even by the time I actually put this on paper and give a 17. Maybe even 9th, to be honest, 9th or 10th. But, yeah. Should we move on? Anything else?
Not for me.